uniquely privileged today to step directly into the footsteps of the American Revolution. When we think of the spark that ignited the spirit of American independence, our minds immediately go to Virginia and to the fiery, unforgettable voice of Patrick Henry, recognized by his contemporaries as the man who gave the first impulse to the ball of revolution. Patrick Henry's legacy is woven in the very fabric of the Commonwealth, and from his service as the first governor to his tireless defense of individual liberties. To bring that legacy alive for us today, we are honored to welcome a very special guest. He is not only a dedicated historian, author, and leading researcher at Patrick Henry's final home and resting place, Red Hill. He is also a direct fifth and sixth generation grandson of Patrick and Sarah Henry. For over 25 years, he's traveled near and far, sharing his personal history of the family and delivering one of the most consequential orientations in history with an unmatched passion and authenticity. He is the co-author of the book Images of America, Patrick Henry's Red Hill. And he's standing in the back.
If I don't stand up there, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Am I allowed to set my stuff on here?
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I know I was introduced as Patrick Henry Jolly, but for a moment, I don't know who Patrick Henry Jolly is. For I am your humble and obedient servant, Governor Patrick Henry, Virginia's only 5-time governor. And according to the Virginia Constitution, as it currently stands, I will remain Virginia's only 5-time governor. Now, I appreciate the warm welcome that you all gave me, but I want you to be aware that it has not always been like that when it comes to how people respond to me. For instance, I think back to 1765. You alluded to Mr. Jefferson's comment where I gave first impulse to the ball of the American Revolution. That was in regards to the stamp tax, which was put upon the colonies by Great Britain. I might add, illegally put upon the colonies by Great Britain. For as many of you know, we had no representation. We had no voice in Parliament as the colonies. Not that they would have listened to us anyway, but that's beside the point. So it was in early May, or late May of 1765. I had been a member of the prestigious Virginia House of Burgesses for just 9 days. And here I was in the company of men like John Robinson, who had been in the speaker's chair for some 25 years. Peyton Randolph, a member for well over 20 years. George Wythe, another who had been around for many, many years. And here I was, 9 days, a member of the House of Burgesses. Now, in previous sessions of the House, the issue of the Stamp Act had come up. Virginia, as well as all of the colonies, had written petitions to Parliament saying that it was unfair for us to pay it. We had no representation. We also couldn't afford it. And it was just wrong. Parliament ignored the comments, and it now became law. Sometimes I'm often compared to people like Samuel Adams up in Massachusetts, a great patriot, somebody who lit the fire of patriotism to the people in Boston. But one of the differences between me and others is the timing of when we did things. For as I mentioned, the Stamp Act was now law. It had not gone into effect. That wouldn't happen until All Saints' Day, November 1st of 1765. But the law had passed. The time of argument and discussion, petitions, that was over. On the 29th of May, my 29th birthday, I might add, the Virginia House of Burgesses had adjourned, and they had reconvened as the Committee of the Whole. All the same members, but they were now in a committee as opposed to the open House of Burgesses. And it was there that I put forth resolutions about this illegal tax. The following day, May 30th, the day after my 29th birthday, those resolutions were read 3 times per protocol to the entire reassembled Virginia House of Burgesses. John Robinson was in the Speaker's chair. Arguments ensued, most of which centered around the fact that Virginia had already petitioned. They were just repeating what had already been done. But I felt in need of urgency. And among my resolutions, I suggested that anybody who supports this resolution is an enemy of the colony. Resolutions were put to vote. They passed. But not by the type of ovation that you all gave me as I entered. They passed by one single vote. Tom Jefferson. You may be familiar with young Tom. He is 6 years my younger. And he was an apprentice. He had graduated from William and Mary in Williamsburg, and he was apprenticing with George Wythe in Wythe's law office. He was standing at the doorway of the House of Burgesses during that session, and Peyton Randolph stormed past Jefferson and out the door, exclaiming, "By God, I would have given 500 guinea for a single vote." Now that tells us 2 things. First of all, voter fraud is not new. Second of all, it reinforces the idea that those resolutions passed by a single vote. Because if Peyton Randolph had his way, the vote would have been tied. And John Robinson, the Speaker of the House of Burgesses, would have voted in the negative. And my resolutions would have been defeated. Where that would leave us today, I can't tell. But it's to that Thomas Jefferson refers to me as giving first impulse to the ball of the American Revolution. Now that's not what you all are here to hear about. You're here to experience something that happened 10 years later. As you know, the relationship between Great Britain and the colonies deteriorated fiercely. More illegal taxes put upon us, quartering of more and more soldiers on this side of the Atlantic. It was in March of 1775 in Richmond, Enrico Parish Church. Today it's known as St. John's. Has anybody ever been to St. John's? Several of you have. Very good. I was in Richmond just yesterday. On that day, on the 4th day of the convention, a Thursday, March 23rd, I felt it was time to do what I knew needed to be done. And I put forth resolutions which would call Virginia into a posture of defense against Great Britain. The relationship had deteriorated that badly. And that was our only hope. We needed to defend ourselves. Now, there were those who agreed with me. There were those that disagreed with me. There were many that may have agreed in principle, but from a practical standpoint, how could we stand up against Great Britain? We're Virginia. We don't have an army. We have county militias that are out of practice, underfunded. And how could we possibly stand up against one of the most powerful military forces in all of the world, Great Britain? And as I mentioned, there were arguments on both sides. And finally, Peyton Randolph, who was serving as the president of the convention, acknowledged me to speak, the gentleman from Hanover County. And I rose. No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen that have just addressed this house. But different men often see the same subject in different light. Therefore, I hope it will not be thought of as disrespectful to these gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, that I should speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before this house is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at the truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and to our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time for fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and guilty of an act of disloyalty against the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Now, it is natural for a man to indulge the illusion of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes to the painful truth and listen to the song of the siren. Listen until she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be among those who, having eyes, see not, or having ears, hear not the things which so nearly concern our temporal salvation? For my own part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth. I'm willing to know the worst and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no other way of judging the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for these last 10 years, which justifies the hopes with which these gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and this house. Is it that insidious smile with which our petitions have been lately received? Trust it not, sir. That shall prove to be a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed by a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with the warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves. These are implements of war, of subjugation. These are the last arguments to which a king resorts. I ask, what means this martial array if its purpose be not to force us into submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motives for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir. She has none. They're meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They're sent over to bind, to rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been for so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? We've been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer on that subject? Nothing. We have held this subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty or humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, let us not deceive ourselves any longer. We have done everything that could be done to avert this storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne and implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions, they've been slighted. Our remonstrances, they've produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications, they've been disregarded. We have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge in the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we need to preserve unviolated these inestimable privileges for which we have been for so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been for so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest has been obtained, then we must fight. I repeat that. We must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But I ask, when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week, next month, next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed? Disarmed, with a British guard stationed at every house. Shall we gather strength by a resolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance while lying supinely on our backs, while hugging that delusive phantom of hope, until our enemy shall abound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak. We are not weak if we make proper use of the means which the God of nature has placed in our powers. Millions of men, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a nation as that which we possess, these men are invincible against any force the enemy shall send against us. Besides, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of the nations, and he will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle is not to the strong alone. It's to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from this contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are already forged. Their clanking can be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat that, let it come. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen, they cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren, they're already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear? Is peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. For I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. I am your humble and obedient servant, Patrick Henry. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I've been performing the speech for, well, a long time. Close to 30 years. Every time I do it, I want it to be new. For me, at least. It's always new for you. I want it to be fresh. I never want to get to the point, and I tell people this often, I never want to get to the point where it's just something that's memorized, which obviously it is. But I never want it to be just something that just gets rattled off while I'm thinking about scores of baseball games or something like that. I want it to be new and fresh every time that I do it. It's not the easiest thing to do when you do it like that, but that's the way I approach what I do, especially with liberty and death. As was introduced, my name is Patrick Henry Jolly. I'm a fifth great grandson, a direct descendant of Patrick Henry through Patrick and his first wife, Sarah, as I think was also mentioned, which sometimes is confusing to folks. Patrick is actually both my fifth and sixth great grandfather. So Patrick and his first wife, Sarah, try to follow me on this without graphics that I have a sign to point to or anything like that, but I'll just kind of use my fingers, I guess. So you got Patrick and Sarah, and they did what they did and had kids. They had 6 of them. And then Patrick later remarried and had 11 more. So Patrick's the father of 17 kids. But anyway, so Patrick and Sarah had 2 daughters. Martha and Elizabeth. Martha was 14 years older than her sister Elizabeth, okay? Martha is the oldest of the Henry children. So 14 years separate these 2 sisters. One of Martha's grandsons married Elizabeth's youngest daughter. Okay, so first cousins once removed. Weird, but not that weird. For back then, okay? I mean, they were just doing straight up first cousins for a while. Marrying straight up first cousins. Anyway, so that's why he's both my 5th and 6th. So Elizabeth is my 4th great grandmother. Her sister Martha is my 5th great grandmother, which makes Sarah and Patrick both my 5th and 6th great grandparents. Anyway, but I've been doing this. I've been doing things at Red Hill. Red Hill was Patrick Henry's last home and burial place. He spent the last 5 years of his life there. Anybody ever been to Red Hill? A couple of you have. Excellent. I do have brochures on the back table for Red Hill if you want to go out. It's about 3 hours away from here. I'll be driving back there this afternoon. have the honor, like I said, of being associated with them for a long time. 4 years ago, I retired. I don't live anywhere around here. I actually live in Ohio. But 4 years ago, I retired up in Ohio, and I spend a lot of time at Red Hill now, for which I'm extremely grateful. Doing what I do, having my name, things like that, has really opened up the door for me to do incredible things, like being here today. This is just as special as any opportunity that I have to do what I do. And so I'm honored to be here. Does anybody have any questions? Patrick Henry is not somebody who's widely known, which is a shame, and we want to rectify that situation. But let's have some questions. Yes?
Did the resolution have the force of law, and specifically did it prohibit Virginians from paying tax to the British?
Oh, so you're talking about the Stamp Act?
Yeah.
So it did not have the force of law in the sense that Parliament was the entity that put the tax upon us, and so we just can't say, I don't want to pay taxes anymore. That'd be cool if we could, right? All in favor of no taxes? All right, we're good. Abigail, guess what? That was not a political statement. Okay, Donald, guess what? I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't care what side of the aisle. We don't like taxes. So it did not really have the force of law, but what it did was it stated that Virginia was going to resist this tax. Now, was that a lawful resistance? Probably not, according to Parliament, and they're the ones that made the law. But all of the colonies, within a matter of weeks, all of the colonies received circulated copies of Patrick's resolutions, and they all began to follow. Stray hair. They all began to follow suit. So Virginia led the resistance, so to speak. And then it actually went into effect on November 1st, but it was virtually ignored for the most part. And then the following, I think, April of 1766. You have to understand, things moved a lot slower back then. But in 1766, I think it was in April, it was actually repealed. Which is great news, except for the fact that then they put other taxes on us. So, the tea taxes, sugar taxes, whatever just all these that kind of got lumped together called the Intolerable Acts. So it had the force of law, kind of in a sense of unity. We are going to unite and not recognize this tax. But really, when it came to the law, I mean, Parliament is the one that put it into position. So they could have enforced it, and things could have gotten really ugly. Well, I guess it did, but eventually. I hope that kind of answered your question. Yes?
How often do you get back to Scotstown and Hanover Courthouse?
Not often enough. I love it. I love Scotstown. I've had the opportunity, I shouldn't tell this story, but I will. I do that a lot. I shouldn't do this, but I do. I had the opportunity about 12 years ago, 11 or 12 years ago, to spend the night there, which was really cool. Spend the night. Scotstown was Patrick Henry's home in the 1770s. He purchased it in 1771, I think, and sold it in 1778. It was there that he was living when he did the Liberty or Death speech in Richmond. It was there where he was elected as governor for the first 3 terms. And so Scotstown's a very special place in Hanover County. How far is that from here, where we are? Is it? Okay. So that is the only original home to Patrick Henry that still stands and is open to the public. That's Scotstown. I'm not associated with them, but they're a good organization over there. Hanover Courthouse, another special place. That's another original site where Patrick Henry did the Parsons Cause, as well as probably a lot of legal cases, but that would be his most famous one at Hanover. There was another Hanover. Yes?
What was the family's business? His family that he...
His father, I've got to sneeze just so you know. So It's there, but not quite. But it'll come out. You'll know it. Just kidding. Patrick's father was born and raised and college educated over in Scotland. Came over sometime in the 1720s and worked at a plantation called Studley Plantation. And Patrick's father was a surveyor. He was a county official. He was a magistrate, which is a civilian judge. He justice of the peace, sheriff, several things over in Hanover County, but also a farmer. Not the best of businessmen. Patrick would end up kind of bailing him out, as well as his father-in-law, John Shelton, kind of bailing them out financially. Patrick's profession was prior to his entry and a little bit during his entry into the House of Burgesses was an attorney, a self-taught attorney. He was only educated until he was about 15 years old. So he didn't do what Thomas Jefferson did as far as going to college and then apprenticing with anybody. He borrowed some law books and then went and was interviewed.
At the risk of inappropriateness, kind of, first of all, I'm a DC resident, so your speech resonated with me.
Okay.
But also, I would like to ask your opinion historically that you mentioned about voter fraud. Is it not the case that voter fraud has been found to be extremely limited, and and that it's more likely that person in your speech who said, "Get me one more vote," sounds indeed more like an elected official asking the Secretary of State to find 11,000 more votes. Okay.
I will address the historical aspect of it. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the modern ones. But from a historical standpoint, I really think that Peyton Randolph, who many of you probably know about Peyton, know Peyton Randolph, a very well-respected member of the House of Burgesses, president of the Second Continental Congress until he left, and then John Hancock took over. A great leader in Virginia. His brother John Randolph, there are several John Randolphs, but the John Randolph, who's the brother of Peyton Randolph, remained a Tory, and he left during the Revolution and went back to England, never to return. But Peyton Randolph, I think more than anything, was just kind of speaking out of frustration. But voter fraud, one of Patrick's first cases when he was a member, when he was admitted to the General Court, which was a court that was held in Williamsburg, was a case of voter fraud. Littlepage versus Dandridge. And a fellow by the name of Littlepage had won a seat in the Virginia House of Burgesses, and Colonel Dandridge, who later would become Patrick's father-in-law, his second wife, accused Littlepage of bribing his constituents. And it was not uncommon, Washington did it, where you would set up kind of like lemonade stands, but it wasn't lemonade. Mike's Hard Lemonade, right? It was hard lemonade, kind of along the way to the courthouse where the elections would take place, so people could get some refreshments along the way, and kind of lift their spirits at the same time. It was a common practice. I mean, I'm not saying it was right, but that just kind of in the theme of voter fraud. Patrick ended up losing that case, and Littlepage was found to have won his seat legitimately. Yes, sir.
Move forward about a dozen years. Are you in a position to talk about Patrick Henry's opposition to the Constitution?
I'd love to. So Patrick Henry, as you mentioned, moving ahead several years, 1788 was when Virginia ratified, June of 1788. Today's the 20th. They ratified on the 25th, I think it was, June 25th, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, Patrick led the opposition to ratification. Don't think that he was against, against the United States. He was against the Constitution as it was written. Understand, as it was originally written, there are no amendments to the Constitution, so there's no Bill of Rights. All it is talking about how to establish this government. He had concerns, which would prove valid through the years, of a centralized government that was trying to govern a very diverse geographic area, different economic values, things like that, between the North and the South. Things like this might come into fruition later. But he foresaw issues of a large centralized government that was trying to run the whole show. So in June of 1788, in leading the opposition, he was not successful. Virginia did ratify, but it was ratified by only about 10 votes. It was a very narrow victory for the Constitution in Virginia. But what he did was open up the conversation, because the conversation was not in place. He opened up the conversation about amendments. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm being serious here, and I'm not being political. Okay, so understand and listen to what I'm about to say really, really careful, because I've had people misinterpret what I say, and that leads to hurt feelings and all that. In Patrick's time, okay, when you think of this country, we're 250 years old, right? And when a baby is born, they're not a mature adult, right? They grow up, they make mistakes, they're not fully developed. They grow into who we're supposed to be, hopefully. Think of our country. Our founders established this nation in its infancy. Was it perfect? Certainly it was not perfect. Was it fully developed? Certainly it's not. Are we fully developed 250 years later? No, we're not. No, we're not. But here's the big but. When our I have no idea what this is, but I saw this earlier. It's kind of, it's a dulcimer pick. Okay. I saw it earlier when I was doing the speech, and I didn't have my glasses on, so I was like, oh, it's a rock. Okay, I was being serious, right? So when our founders wrote things like, all men are created equal, okay, we find some issues with that. We find some issues with that, first of all, because men, if we want to get, in that sense, there's a problem right there. Men are created equal. Now you can look at it in the biblical sense, where you go back to the original Greek and anthropos, which means mankind, people, okay? Let's just for a minute say that that's what they meant, okay? But in Patrick Henry's time, in Thomas Jefferson's time, when that was written, was everybody equal in the eyes of the law? No. Now, I'm trying to think how I'm wording this, but anyway, so we'll just go on with that. So, they weren't equal in the eyes of the law. Now, here's the part that's going to be, that I don't want to start any wars. Today, according to the law, I'll say that one more time, according to the law, are we all equal? We are. We are. The question that begs to be asked is, how do we treat one another? Whether you're talking about law enforcement, that always seems to be a hot topic, or whether you're talking about your neighbors that live down the street, that look differently from you, or act differently from you, have different beliefs, worship completely different from you. Do you still look at them as being equal with you? So that's kind of the lesson, and I won't be serious anymore after that. That's the heavy part. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious that in the speech he evokes slavery and the images and the da-da-da-da-da. And I don't know anything if he was a slave owner or what his beliefs, like Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner, but was sort of morally opposed to slavery.
Right.
Grand contradiction. I'm curious what Patrick Henry's.
Very similar. So the question was, she referenced the fact that Patrick Henry in the speech talks about slavery and that we can become slaves if we're not careful, blah, blah, blah. And so she's asking about the contradiction in Patrick's heart. And it is a contradiction. It's a huge contradiction. And it's one that I can't stand up here and fully justify because I'm not Patrick Henry. He was morally opposed, as were many of these guys. Morally opposed to the institution of slavery. He wrote about it in 1773 to a fellow in Richmond by the name of Robert Pleasance, who was an abolitionist. Patrick Henry looked forward to the day when the lamentable institution of slavery would be abolished. We were in our infancy. We hadn't gotten it right yet. And fortunately, he led the fight to make sure we have a Bill of Rights. And in that Bill of Rights, today, we're all equal, right? And so, am I saying that Patrick Henry is responsible for us all being equal? No, not necessarily, but at least opening up the door. So specifically with slavery.
15th Amendment, right?
What's that?
To the 13th, the 14th Amendment.
Exactly, yes. And so, directly to your point, though, about slavery, it was something that he was morally against. He looked forward to the day that it would be abolished. But in his words, he couldn't imagine living without with the inconvenience of not having them. It sounds very trite to us today. There are some things I will address there. And understand, I'm not defending Patrick Henry as an enslaver, okay? As the governor of Virginia in 1780, I want to say 84, doesn't really matter. So Patrick was governor 3 times, then according to the Constitution, Virginia Constitution, a candidate had to take 4 years off before he could be eligible again. Patrick took the 4 years off, was again elected twice, actually 6 times, but declined the last time. He declined a lot of stuff. He declined all these federal positions. We'll get into that if we have time. But Judy was a free black woman. And Judy communicated with Patrick somehow. I don't know the method of communication. But he learned his story, her story, and she was a free black woman with a small child. In essence, she wanted to travel from point A to point B. She was terrified to do that because as a black person, you're going to be caught, could be caught and treated as a runaway. A black woman, that would be really bad. A black woman with a child, that'd be really, really bad. So she somehow communicated with Governor Henry about this. Governor Henry then wrote a letter, and I have a transcription of the letter. I've never seen the original document, but I have a transcription of it. He wrote a letter to his Attorney General, Edmund Randolph, and said, here's Judy's story. Your job is to make sure she gets safely from point A to point B. And here's money to make sure it happens. So when I think about that, I think about Patrick Henry doing the right thing according to the law. Okay? In Patrick's time, slavery was something that was legal. It's wrong, but it's legal. And we could probably point to laws today that might be legal, but in our hearts are wrong. And you might have specific things bounce around in your head right now, and that's fine. But when I hear that story, I hear somebody who understands this person has a legal right to have safe travel where she wants to be, and he wants to make sure it happens. Does that justify anything as far as slavery? No, it doesn't. But it might give us a little bit of a hint as to what his heart was about.
Thank you.
Yes?
What was the relationship with Jefferson?
Oh, boy.
Did Henry have any input into the Declaration?
No, so I'll answer the second part first. What was the relationship of Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson? And second of all, did he have any input into the Declaration? I'm going to answer the second part of that first. Patrick Henry was one of the original delegates to the Second Continental Congress, okay? That's the Congress where we declared our independence. That's the famous Congress with all these guys lining up, signing the Declaration, okay? Patrick Henry, George Washington, Peyton Randolph, and somebody else left after the first session of that Second Congress. They did not return. George Washington was made Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Peyton Randolph stayed in Virginia and was Speaker of the House of Burgesses, and Patrick Henry became Commander-in-Chief of the Virginia Army. Okay? So that opened the door for alternates to attend. Alternates, people that are not chosen, not original delegates to the Congress. And one of those, the one that replaced Peyton Randolph, was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was not an original delegate. That's not a slam against him. It's just, I think it's something that points to maybe divine providence, kind of made sure that he was where he was supposed to be when he needed to be there. The guy was only 33 years old and wrote a major document in American history, or at least had major input on it. If it's still debatable as to what role. There was a committee of 5 that were charged with writing this declaration, and they kind of pointed to him and said, here, you write the draft, and they made all kinds of edits, and then he kind of made the final draft, which was submitted and passed on the morning of the 4th. So Patrick Henry was not there. He was an original delegate, but he was not there. Going back to now the relationship between Patrick and Thomas. I'm going to try to make this quick. It's something I could do a whole talk on. Because they had a great relationship up until 1781. And even Thomas Jefferson points to 1781 as their relationship splitting. Specifically the point where Tarleton and his men chased the assembly out of Richmond, then into Charlottesville, then from Charlottesville to Stanton. Y'all familiar with Jack Jewett? Please say yes. Okay. How many people are here know Paul Revere? Everybody knows Paul Revere. Okay. It's okay. Patrick, settle down. Louisa County's near here, isn't it? Learn about 4th grade history. Okay, Louisa County's nearby, right? Kind of nearby. I will be totally honest with you all right now. I am not 100% sure where I am. I'm not really familiar with this part of Virginia, this part of Virginia. I'm sorry, I just trashed my credibility. But anyway, Jack Jewett was at Cuckoo Tavern, named after a cuckoo clock, in Louisa County, okay? And he heard Tarleton's men who had chased the assembly out of Richmond to Charlottesville. He had heard, and I don't mean to ridicule you all, I apologize. I get sarcastic and I'm sorry. He heard that Tarleton's men were going to go after Jefferson and the assembly in Charlottesville, and specifically Monticello. So Tarleton and his men kind of rested for a while at the tavern and doing whatever you do at a tavern, and started on their way on the road. Jewett knew he had to get to Charlottesville, specifically Monticello, right now, a distance of about 40 miles. So he jumped on his horse, and instead of taking the roads where Tarleton's men would be, he went straight through the woods. Some people believe it's where Three Chop Road kind of goes east to west, down in Louisa County in Albemarle. But he made a beeline to warn Jefferson and the assembly. They ended up leaving. The assembly left, went up to Stanton. Jefferson, on the other hand, went back to Poplar Forest, which is over near Lynchburg, over kind of in the Bedford area, it's Forest, east of Bedford. And the assembly kind of took issue with that. His term as governor literally had ended like a day or two prior to this, so he was no longer the governor, and so he left. But the assembly is who elects the governor, and there was no governor, and there wasn't one for several days. So they looked into his actions as governor, and that was something that really hurt his feelings. Even though after the war was over, they said, hey, you did a great job as governor, nothing ever came of it. But he later wrote Mason and said that, that they wounded me in a way that could only be cured by the all-healing grave. A little dramatic, but that broke that started the rift in the relationship. He, for some reason, there's no evidence, but there's some reason that he seemed to blame Henry for that. There's nothing that points to Henry leading that, but then later, there were some things, and I'm jumping way ahead here, and again, kind of speaking in broad strokes, because technically I think I end in 1 minute. But I'll sit here and talk. I'm going to be over at the Lutheran Church at 3 o'clock. We'll do this again, okay? And I'll tell you all the stories you want. But towards the end of his life, there were what became known as the doesn't matter what they were called. They were resolutions, or they were acts that were signed into law by Adams that basically limited, I'm going to say it kind of limited free speech, but please, again, don't get political and don't think today's standards. I mean, we're talking major stuff. And Jefferson and Madison authored what became referred to as the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. And it basically gave the right, supposedly gave the right to states, if they disagreed with the federal law, that we don't have to obey it. And we could even go to the point of secession. Now, nothing ever happened with that. Obviously, it did years later. But nothing ever happened with that. But that terrified Washington. Washington's a Federalist. Henry's a states' rights guy who now accepts the fact that the Constitution is in place, and he's like, okay, this is what y'all want, this is what we got. I'm going to be a good citizen, I'm not going to rock the boat. But now you've got the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. So Washington calls Henry out of retirement. He finally comes out and runs for the Virginia House of Delegates, representative of Charlotte County, which is where Red Hill is. And he won his seat, but he never took office because he died in June of 1799. But that was another kind of final nail in the coffin, the political differences between Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson, again, I don't want to end this on a bad note, but Thomas Jefferson really is the one who is primarily responsible. It's a bigger picture as to why Patrick is not remembered today. He did a lot to thwart Patrick Henry's memory after June of 1799, which is very sad. He basically held a grudge and really let it go when Patrick was gone and could no longer defend himself because he was dead. I don't want to say that and put Jefferson in a bad light, though. I really don't. Jefferson played a major role in where we are as a country, and I want to acknowledge that. I don't want to, but there are other things that play into it. Patrick, many of the other founders sat for biographers, sat for portrait pictures. Patrick didn't do any of that stuff. Some of them wrote their own biographies. Patrick didn't even keep a journal. No diary, no nothing. He just did what he did. He woke up in the morning and he went to work and did what he did and then came home to his family. Well, sometimes he was gone for months at a time, but but he wasn't somebody who sought a legacy. He, when his last public appearance, and I'll end it with this. His last public appearance at Charlotte Courthouse in March of 1799, there were a bunch of people gathered around him. He didn't come out in public very much towards the end of his life, and now we're just 3 months away from him dying. And he was there in public on court day. People were thronged. They were all over him. And this Baptist preacher kind of was jealous and just kind of made a comment. He goes, why do they I forget how he worded it. Why do they pay so much attention to Mr. Henry? He's not a god. And Patrick Henry heard that. And he said, no, I'm not a god. I'm but a worm of the dust. And like the shadow of the cloud over the field over yonder, it's going to be gone, and I'm going to be remembered no more. It's kind of prophetic. Because today, he's not remembered the way he should be. And I know that after I say what I'm about to say, you're going to say, well, of course you said that because you're related to Patrick and you work at Red Hill. But let me leave Thomas out of this for a moment. If George Washington was here, if I took a survey right now and said who most represents 1770, this 250th that we're celebrating, who most represents that? You all probably would, and I probably would not completely disagree with you, we'd pick somebody like George Washington, and we would put him up on that pedestal. But I feel in my heart, and I said this in an interview, I feel in my heart that if he was up on this pedestal, he would reach down and take Patrick's hand and pull him right up there. So would Thomas Jefferson if he was honest. He said things that put Patrick Henry on a pedestal. Where would we be as a country without Patrick Henry? He's the one who gave first impulse to the ball of the American Revolution. The most persuasive speaker. You know, he said all of these things when he wasn't being really free with compliments. So I believe that Patrick Henry was probably, I shouldn't say I believe, but I think that things point to the fact that Virginia was certainly, as the Virginia 250 Commission says, America, Virginia, or made in Virginia. That Virginia was the most influential of the colonies and of the early states, and that Patrick Henry was probably the most influential person in Virginia. With that, I'm gonna leave you all. I do have brochures back there for Red Hill. I'm here to talk about whatever you want to talk about in an hour. I'm going to be at the Lutheran Church, and we'll